The stranger's hands were shaking when he pressed the ranch deed into my palm and whispered that if anyone knew he'd found me, we'd both be dead. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button real quick. Tomorrow's story is going to absolutely blow your mind, and you won't want to miss it. I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Meadowbrook Group Home, celebrating my 18th birthday alone with a stale muffin and lukewarm coffee when he walked in. The man was probably in his 60s, with gray hair and eyes that kept darting toward the door like he expected someone to burst through it any second. He looked at every face in the room before his gaze landed on me, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or fear. He walked straight to my table and sat down without asking, which should have freaked me out, but there was something desperate in his face that made me stay put. "You're Claire," he said. Not a question, a statement. I'd never seen him before in my life. "Who are you?" "My name is Frank," he said, pulling a manila envelope from inside his jacket. His hands trembled as he set it on the table between us. "I've been looking for you for 6 months, ever since your aunt died." My aunt! I'd spent 18 years in the foster system, bounced between 7 different homes, and no one had ever mentioned an aunt. The social workers had always told me I had no family, that my parents died when I was 2, and there was no one else. "I don't have an aunt," I said. "You did. Her name was Margaret Sullivan. She passed away last April." Frank glanced over his shoulder again, then leaned closer. "She left you something. A ranch in Montana, 300 acres, a house, livestock, everything." My heart started pounding. This had to be some kind of scam. People didn't just inherit ranches from relatives they'd never heard of. Why didn't anyone tell me about her? Frank's jaw tightened. "Because there are people who didn't want you to know. People who wanted that land for themselves." He pushed the envelope toward me. "Everything's in here. The deed, transfer documents, a letter from Margaret. But you need to leave town tonight. Once they realize I found you, they'll come looking." "Who will come looking?" "Your uncle, Margaret's brother, Richard. He's been trying to claim the ranch since she died, saying Margaret was mentally unfit when she made her will, that the property should go to him as next of kin. But Margaret was sharp as a tack. She knew exactly what she was doing when she left everything to you. She just couldn't tell anyone where you were because Richard would have found out." I stared at the envelope, my mind racing. If she knew about me, why didn't she ever contact me? Why did I grow up in foster care? Pain flickered across Frank's face. "That's complicated. It's all in the letter, but the short version is that your parents' death wasn't an accident. Margaret spent years trying to prove it, and by the time she had evidence, she was afraid that bringing you into her life would put you in danger. So she watched from a distance, made sure you were safe, and planned to give you everything when you turned 18. Evidence of what? Who killed my parents? Frank stood up abruptly. "Read the letter. Everything's explained. But Claire, you need to trust me. Get on a bus tonight and head to Montana. The ranch is in a town called Copper Ridge. When you get there, go to the sheriff's office and ask for Sheriff Tom Bradford. He's expecting you, and he's the only person in that town you can trust." "Wait, what about you? How did you know where to find me?" "I was Margaret's attorney. She gave me sealed instructions to be opened when you turned 18. Those instructions included your name, your birthday, and the name of the group home where you've been living for the past 4 years. She kept tabs on you through a private investigator, but she made sure nothing could be traced back to her. He pulled out a business card and set it on the table. If you need anything, call me, but use a burner phone, not your regular cell. And Claire, be careful. Richard is dangerous, and he has connections. Don't trust anyone who approaches you about the ranch. Before I could ask anything else, Frank walked out of the coffee shop and disappeared into the afternoon crowd. I sat there for a long time, staring at the envelope. Part of me wanted to throw it away and forget this conversation ever happened. The other part, the part that had spent 18 years wondering why I had no one, couldn't resist opening it. Inside was a property deed listing me as the owner of the Sullivan Ranch in Copper Ridge, Montana. There were legal documents with official seals, bank statements showing an account with $43,000 in my name, and a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery. "My dearest Claire," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Frank has managed to find you. I'm sorry for so many things. Sorry that I couldn't be part of your life. Sorry that you grew up thinking you had no family. Sorry that I'm leaving you with questions and danger instead of the peaceful inheritance you deserve. Your parents, my sister Emily and her husband David, were killed 20 years ago. Everyone believed it was a car accident, but it wasn't. They were murdered by my brother Richard because they discovered something he was desperate to keep hidden. Richard has been involved in illegal activities for decades: money laundering, fraud, intimidation. Your parents found evidence of his crimes and were planning to go to the police. Richard found out and staged their accident. I couldn't prove it at the time. By the time I gathered enough evidence, you were already in the system, and Richard had convinced everyone that I was a paranoid old woman making wild accusations against her own brother. I was afraid that if I claimed you, Richard would hurt you too. So I made the hardest decision of my life and let you stay hidden in foster care where he couldn't find you. But I never stopped watching over you, and I never stopped planning for your future. The ranch is yours, free and clear. The money in the trust will give you a start. Everything I have is yours because you're the only family that matters to me. But please, be careful. Richard will fight for this property. He's always been jealous that our father left the ranch to me instead of him, and he's spent years trying to take it. Don't let him win. There's something else you should know. Hidden in the ranch house, in the cellar behind the wine rack, there's a safe. The combination is your birthday, 062206. Inside that safe is all the evidence I collected about Richard's crimes and your parents' murder. Take it to Sheriff Bradford. He's been helping me gather information for years, waiting for the day when you'd be old enough to inherit and Richard could finally be brought to justice. I wish I could have known you, Claire. I wish I could have given you the childhood you deserved. But I hope this ranch, this land that's been in our family for 4 generations, can give you the foundation I couldn't provide. With all my love, Aunt Margaret. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking harder each time. My parents had been murdered. I had an aunt who'd been watching over me, and apparently I had an uncle who was dangerous enough that his own sister had been afraid of him. I looked around the coffee shop, suddenly paranoid. Was anyone watching me? Had Richard somehow found out that Frank was meeting me today? I shoved everything back into the envelope and left, walking quickly back to Meadowbrook. I had exactly 6 hours before my official checkout time, when I'd age out of the system and be on my own anyway. The group home had arranged for me to move into a transitional housing program for former foster youth, but that plan seemed ridiculous now. I packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags: clothes, toiletries, the few books I'd collected over the years, and the photo album Mrs. Henderson, my first foster mother, had made for me. Then I took the $273 I'd saved from my part-time job at the library and added it to the cash that Frank had included in the envelope, another $500 for travel expenses. At 9 o'clock that night, I walked out of Meadowbrook Group Home for the last time. No one said goodbye. Most of the staff had already left for the day, and the kids who were still there didn't notice me leaving. I was just another 18-year-old aging out, and they'd seen dozens of us come and go. The bus station was nearly empty. I bought a ticket to Montana with a transfer in Denver, using cash like Frank had suggested. The next bus left at 11:15, so I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair and tried to process everything that had happened in the past 6 hours. I'd woken up this morning thinking I was completely alone in the world. Now I had an aunt who'd loved me from a distance, a ranch I'd never seen, and an uncle who might want me dead. It was too much to wrap my head around. The bus ride took almost 30 hours with all the stops and transfers. I slept in fits and starts, jerking awake every time someone walked past my seat, convinced they were coming for me. I kept thinking about Margaret's letter, about the safe in the cellar, and the evidence against Richard. What exactly had my parents discovered? How had Richard managed to get away with murder for 20 years? We finally arrived in Copper Ridge just after 7 in the morning. The town was small, maybe 3,000 people, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. Main Street had the basics: a grocery store, a diner, a feed supply shop, and a sheriff's office with peeling paint on the wooden sign out front. I walked into the sheriff's office with my duffel bags, probably looking exactly like what I was, a homeless teenager with nowhere else to go. A woman at the front desk looked up from her computer. "Help you?" "I need to see Sheriff Bradford. Frank Walker sent me." Her expression changed immediately. She picked up the phone and spoke quietly, then nodded to me. "He'll be right out." A minute later, a man in his 50s came through a door at the back. He was tall and solid, with gray hair cut military short and eyes that assessed me in one quick sweep. "You must be Claire. I'm Tom Bradford. Come on back." He led me to a small office and closed the door. "Frank called yesterday and said he'd found you. I'm glad you're here." "He said you've been helping my aunt, that you know about Richard." Tom nodded slowly. "Your aunt was a good woman, one of the best I've ever known. She came to me about 7 years ago with suspicions about your parents' accident. At first, I thought she was just grieving, looking for someone to blame. But the more we investigated, the more things didn't add up. Margaret spent years collecting evidence, and I helped where I could, quietly, because Richard has connections in this county. If he'd known we were building a case, he would have destroyed evidence, or worse. Frank said Richard's been trying to claim the ranch. He filed a claim 3 days after Margaret died, saying she wasn't mentally competent when she made her will. But Margaret had medical documentation proving she was completely lucid. She'd been planning for this, making sure everything was ironclad. The probate judge ruled in your favor 2 weeks ago, But Richard's appealing. He's also been harassing the ranch foreman, trying to convince him to leave so the property falls into disrepair. My stomach twisted. So, even though it's legally mine, he's trying to make it worthless? That's part of it. The other part is that he genuinely believes he deserves the ranch. Your grandfather left it to Margaret because Richard was already in trouble with the law back then, and your grandfather didn't trust him to manage the property. Richard's been bitter about it for 35 years. What happens now? Tom leaned back in his chair. Now you claim your inheritance. I'll drive you out to the ranch and introduce you to Jack Morrison, the foreman. He's been keeping the place running, and he's loyal to Margaret's memory. Then, when you're ready, we go through the evidence in the safe and build our case against Richard. What comes next is something I never saw coming. Stick with me and make sure you subscribe. The ranch was 12 miles outside of town, down a dirt road that wound through pine forests and open meadows. When we crested the final hill, I saw it spread out below, a 2-story log house with a green metal roof, a massive red barn, several outbuildings, and fields that stretched toward the mountains. 300 acres, Tom said. Margaret ran cattle mostly, about 150 head. Jack's been managing them with 2 part-time ranch hands. The operation's been profitable every year for the last decade. I couldn't speak. I'd never owned anything except the clothes on my back and a few books. Now I was looking at hundreds of acres of land, buildings, animals, an entire working ranch. A man came out of the barn as we pulled up, probably in his 40s, with dark hair and a weathered face. "That's Jack," Tom said. Jack Morrison walked over and shook my hand with a firm grip. "You look like your mama. She was a good person. Margaret talked about her all the time." "Thank you," I managed. "Margaret told me about you a few months before she passed. Said one day her niece would show up to claim the place, and I should help you learn the ropes." He gestured toward the barn. "I'll show you around, and then we'll get you settled in the house." Margaret left everything exactly as it was. She wanted you to feel at home. The tour took over an hour. Jack showed me the cattle operation, the equipment, the pastures, and water sources. He introduced me to the 2 ranch hands, brothers named Cole and Travis, who seemed friendly enough but reserved. I didn't blame them for being cautious. I was some city kid who'd never been on a ranch before, suddenly owning the place they worked. The house was beautiful inside. Log walls, stone fireplace, furniture that looked handmade and built to last. Family photos lined the mantel, including several of a young woman who must have been my mother. I picked up one of her laughing at something off camera, probably around my age, and felt a sharp ache in my chest. "That was Emily," Jack said quietly. "Margaret kept all her photos up, said it helped her remember the good times." After Jack left, Tom and I stood in the kitchen. "You ready to look at the safe?" I nodded, though my heart was racing. The cellar was accessed through a door in the mudroom. Stone steps led down to a cool, dim space that smelled like earth and old wood. The wine rack was against the far wall, and when Tom helped me move it, I saw the safe behind it, built into the stone foundation. My hand shook as I entered the combination, 062206, my birthday, June 22nd, 2006. The safe clicked open. Inside were 4 thick file folders, a stack of photographs, and several USB drives labeled with dates. Tom pulled out the first folder and started reading. "Bank records," he said, showing transfers from Richard's business accounts to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Margaret tracked 10 years of transactions, over $2 million moved illegally. The second folder contained correspondence between Richard and various business associates discussing fraudulent real estate deals and intimidation tactics against people who questioned his practices. The third folder was about my parents. Police reports from their accident, photos of the crash scene, and Margaret's notes pointing out inconsistencies. The brake lines had been cut. There were tool marks that the original investigation had missed or ignored. A witness had seen a truck following my parents' car that day, but that witness had never been officially interviewed. The fourth folder was the worst. It contained a recorded conversation between Richard and another man, discussing how to handle the problem of Emily and David. The recording was 20 years old, scratchy and hard to hear in places, but clear enough. "We can't let them go to the cops," Richard's voice said. "Too much at stake." "So what do you want me to do?" the other man asked. "Make it look like an accident. Brake failure. Something quick. No one looks too hard at car accidents." I sank down onto the cellar floor, my legs suddenly unable to hold me up. This was proof, actual, undeniable proof that my parents had been murdered, and Richard had ordered it. Tom put a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is hard, but this is what we needed. With this evidence, we can finally bring Richard to justice." Over the next week, Tom worked with the county prosecutor to build a case. They verified the authenticity of the documents and the recording. They interviewed the witness who'd seen the truck. They brought in forensic accountants to trace Richard's financial crimes. I stayed at the ranch, trying to learn how to run the place with Jack's patient teaching. Every morning, I woke up in my mother's childhood bedroom, surrounded by her things that Margaret had preserved. Every evening, I sat on the porch and watched the sun set over land that had been in my family for generations. Richard was arrested on a Wednesday morning. I wasn't there to see it, but Tom called to tell me it had happened. He was being charged with 2 counts of murder, multiple counts of fraud and money laundering, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. "He'll spend the rest of his life in prison," Tom said. "Your parents can finally rest in peace." But Richard had one final move to make. 3 days after his arrest, his lawyer showed up at the ranch with an offer. Richard would confess to everything and accept a plea deal if I agreed to sell him the ranch for $1. "He's obsessed with this land," the lawyer explained. "He believes it should have been his from the beginning. If you give him the ranch, he'll plead guilty and save the state the expense of a trial." I looked at the lawyer for a long moment. "Tell Richard that this ranch belonged to my grandfather, who left it to Margaret because he knew Richard wasn't worthy of it. It belonged to my aunt, who spent years protecting it and me from Richard's greed. And now it belongs to me. Tell him I'd rather burn every building to the ground than let him set foot on this property. And tell him my parents are going to get the justice they deserve, whether he confesses or not." The lawyer left, and I never heard from Richard again. The trial was 6 months later. I testified about finding the evidence, about Margaret's letter, about everything I'd learned. Richard was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That night, I stood in the same spot where I'd first seen the ranch, looking out over the land. Jack walked over and stood beside me. "Your aunt would be proud," he said. "You fought for what was right." "She gave me everything," I said. "The least I could do was make sure it mattered." "So what are you going to do now? Keep the ranch or sell it and move on?" I thought about that question a lot over the past months. I'd enrolled in online classes through Montana State, studying ranch management and agriculture. I'd learned to ride horses, mend fences, and understand the rhythm of life on a working ranch. I'd found a community in Copper Ridge, people who'd known my mother and welcomed me as one of their own. "I'm staying," I said. "This is home." And it was, not because of the land or the buildings or even the family history, but because Margaret had given me something more valuable than property. She'd given me truth, justice, and the knowledge that I came from people who fought for what was right, even when it cost them everything. The ranch wasn't just an inheritance, it was a legacy, and I was going to honor it. Thank you so much for listening to Claire's story. If it moved you, please subscribe to the channel and help us share these stories of courage, justice, and unexpected inheritances. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Claire's situation? Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to check out the other incredible stories on screen right now. Until next time, remember that the truth always finds a way to the surface, no matter how long it's been buried.